Moving into another logical relationship is in sentences, purpose. What do we mean by purpose? Always when we have two independent sentences, one sentence explains the aim for doing the action of the other sentence. So we can say, for what purpose am I doing this? We can join the sentences with so that or other conjunctions like in order to, so as to, and to. Let's have an example. Our two independent sentences, when we join them, they become clauses that form one full sentence are as follow. People install solar panels. People can generate electricity with renewable energy. When we ask for what purpose people install solar panels, we say people install solar panels so that they can use or generate electricity with renewable energy. Another example, I can say people boil water for what purpose? To make tea, coffee, etc. In purpose sentences, we can invert sentences also like cause, like condition. I can say to make tea, coffee, etc., people boil water so that people can use or can generate electricity with renewable energy. They install solar panels. The punctuation rule regarding purpose, we have two rules. When we use to, in order to, or so as to, they follow identical rule as condition and cause. These are followed by an infinitive yeah and do not require a comma when they come in the middle of the sentence. She studies hard to pass the exam. He works overtime in order to earn more money. When we use so that connects two independent clauses like in order to, or so as to, we use a comma before it if the first clause is long or complex. For example, he left early so that he could catch the first train. I saved money so that I could buy a new laptop. Comma is optional for short clauses. In fact, comma is all optional in so that, and we can have similar rules with to, in order to, and so as to. Final rule is when we invert the sentences and we start with the purpose, which is the subordinate clause, and then we leave the independent clause to come next. So I say, to improve his pronunciation, comma, he listens to English podcasts every day. In order to complete the project on time, the team worked overnight. And here we have to put a comma after the subordinate clause, which is the purpose clause, not sentence. Concession is another logical relationship in sentences. Concession is when we have two sentences that are opposed in meaning and joined with the conjunction although or other conjunctions. We can have synonym as but. So we have two contradicting ideas. Sometimes we call it concession and contrast. Other conjunctions, we have two groups of conjunctions that follow the same rules. We can have, however, synonym of it is nevertheless. We can have nonetheless, still, yet, and even so. The second group that follow the same rule is although, though, and even though. These three are also synonyms. We have an example. The solar panels are expensive. people still buy the solar panels for nature. When I tell you the solar panels are expensive, you expect people not to buy them because they are very expensive. But what I say instead is people buy them to help nature. When I join the clauses with although, I say although solar panels are expensive, people still buy them for nature. I can invert the sentences and say people still buy the solar panels although they are expensive. But if I use however, it has to come in the middle of the sentence. I say solar panels are expensive, however, people still buy them for nature. And here lays the difference between the two groups of conjunctions. When I use however, synonym of it might be nevertheless, nonetheless, still, yet, even so, and I can add also but. They always come in the middle of the sentence. We cannot invert the two clauses like the rule of consequence or the rule of effect. We cannot invert sentences. They always come in the middle of the sentence, these conjunctions. When I use the second group of conjunctions, although, though, and even though, here I can either start the subordinate clause in the beginning or leave it second to have the conjunction in the middle. In concessive sentences, we have to place a comma after the subordinate clause, which is the concessive clause, in case it comes first before the independent clause. We have example 1. Although solar panels are expensive, I have to put comma y because we have although in the beginning of the sentence and the subordinate clause, here comes the first clause in a whole sentence. The independent or main clause comes second. When the opposite happens, which is independent clause comes first and then subordinate clause comes second, we need no punctuation. This is when I use the second group of conjunctions, which are although, though, and even though. If I use however, nevertheless, still, but, and the synonyms, I cannot invert the sentences, and therefore the punctuation differs. Artificial intelligence systems are becoming more advanced. Semicolon, I put the conjunction, one of these, then comma, they still rely on human supervision. This rule reminds us very closely to the rule of result. We cannot invert sentences, therefore we have to put semicolon before the conjunction and comma after it. The robot malfunctioned, even so, comma, it completed most of its programmed tasks. We have two rules. You choose either to put semicolon before and comma after the conjunction, or you put the independent clause and then you put full stop. You start the dependent clause with a conjunction and you finish your full sentence. Let's have a task to practice the rules we saw today together. In the following sentences, we are going to try to first underline the subordinate clause and circle the subordinating conjunction, then state the logical relationship exists in. And we start with sentence 1. The rocket launch was delayed because the weather conditions were unstable. So the answer would be because is the conjunction. And the subordinating clause is because the weather conditions were unstable. If you ask the question of what relationship are we expressing here, the answer would be cause-effect relationship, more precisely cause. Sentence 2, the drone will return to its base if the battery level drops below 10%. We have if as the conjunction, and if the battery level drops below 10% is the subordinate clause. It cannot stand alone because it starts with the conjunction if. The relationship is condition. Sentence 3. In order to simulate the flow of blood in the artery, researchers built a 3D model. Where is the conjunction here? In order to. The subordinate clause is in order to simulate the flow of blood in the artery. What relationship is expressed? Purpose, because we can ask, for what purpose researchers built a 3D model? Researchers built a 3D model in order to simulate the flow of blood in the artery. Another example, though the telescope is located in a desert, it can capture images of distant galaxies. We need to find the subordinating conjunction, which is though. Then the subordinate clause here is though the telescope is located in a desert. When we find a subordinated conjunction, we're naturally going to find the subordinate clause because it is attached to it. What is left is called main clause or independent clause. The relationship expressed here is known thanks to the subordinating conjunction used, which is concession. Final sentence. The chemical reaction was faster than expected. Therefore, the experiments produced unexpected results. Where is the conjunction? Therefore is the conjunction. And where is the subordinate clause? Therefore, the experiment produced unexpected results. Quick question here. Can we invert these two clauses? Can I start the sentence with therefore the experiment produced unexpected results? The chemical reaction was faster than expected? No, I cannot, because this is a result or effect sentence. The clauses in effect sentence we said cannot be inverted, unlike condition and cause and purpose and concession with although, even though, and though.